Okay, so we're back again with Dr. Rob Ford, and we're going to talk here about the Poli30242 essay on why do Black and Asian Britons reject the Conservative Party? Over to you, Rob.
Right, well, the first thing that you're going to need to consider with this question is you need to establish the phenomenon that the question is assuming, that it is in fact the case that Black and Asian Conservatives reject the Black and Asian voters reject the Conservative Party. So for that you want to make reference to the cigar literature, the recent papers by Sobolewska et al. In order to show that Black and Asian Britons don't vote for the Conservative Party as much as we might think they do. An important thing to bear in mind here is that the raw vote pattern may be deceptive, because of course Black and Asian Britons may also be more working class, they may also be younger, there may be other reasons that they are less likely to vote Conservative apart from this sort of ethnic specific rejection. So one thing you need to think about is how much of this is ethnic specific and how much is this to do with other structural demographic factors. Then there are some factors you may want to consider in terms of what specifically about the Conservative Party seems to be generating issues for them with regards to Black and Asians. One thing may well be history. It may be that the history of immigration in Britain has played into contemporary conceptions of the Conservative Party amongst Black and Asian voters. You may want to look at the cigar work on this. So, for example, Enoch Powell's activism against immigration may have left a lasting impact. A second factor to consider is whether or not there are policy reasons for Black and Asian voters to reject the Conservative Party. The Conservatives have generally been more right-wing on immigration or on race relations. That may play a role. So this may be self-interested voting rather than necessarily group-based identity voting. Another thing to think about is this to do with representation? Generally speaking, most of the Black and Asian councillors and MPs who've been elected have tended not to be Conservatives. Could that be playing a role? And finally, one thing you may want to think about is party campaigning. Is it perhaps the case that this is actually just rational behaviour on both sides? Most Black and Asian voters may not be in seats where the Conservatives are very competitive, so perhaps it's more a case of they're not really facing a very active option in terms of the Conservative Party, that really the Conservatives have not much incentive to campaign very heavily in seats which are very ethnically diverse, and ethnically minority voters rationally recognise that the Conservatives don't have very much of a chance in the seats that they're in. So that's some of the factors that you want to think about, and of course, as well as referring to the academic literature, you want to think about how do the parties react to this out there in the real world. In particular, the 2010 campaign was quite a seminal one for the Conservative Party, debating quite intensely what to do about the minority vote, about minority representation. So you may want to think about what they did and whether or not it was successful.